I'm going to call the November 14th meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Dee, you're all set to take the roll call?
Roll call. Suresh.
Yes, present.
Okay, thank you. Peggy. Not yet. Kathy Kukalo.
Here.
Eric Dahlberg.
Present.
Thank you. John Carafalo.
Here.
Greg Guriello.
Here.
Thank you. Amrith Kumar. No Amrith yet, okay. And Peggy.
No, I'm here. Sorry.
All right.
Finally, I figured
Woo!
out this mute button thing.
Okay. Amrith, let's see, who's next? Don Kupka.
Present.
Okay. Lindsay Liss.
Present.
Thank you. Dee Ortner, present. Carlin Reed.
Present.
Christine Reynolds.
Here.
Okay. Quasi.
Here.
Thank you. Lois. No. Okay, that's it.
Peggy
Briggs is here.
Who? Peggy. Thank you, Peggy.
And I'm here.
And, oh, did I forget you?
Yeah.
Parashar.
John, did you get John?
Yes, you got time.
Perfect.
I
All
did
right.
get John. Yep.
All right, let's open this up. We have time for public comment. If any members of the public would like to make a comment, come on up here into the microphone, name, rank, and serial number.
Where should I go?
Any one of these mics.
Okay, time for it. Oh, thank you, Carrie. Hi, Cynthia Rainey, 80 Hunters Ridge Road. I am a member of the school committee, but speaking for myself. I was a member of the capital planning task force, and I think our intent was to have the capital plans posted before this hearing, and for then citizens to find a link to then comment outside of a public meeting, so that those comments could be reviewed at the next meeting of both boards, I believe. So I know it's too late to have them posted before the meeting, but if they could be posted after this meeting, and then some kind of a link for citizens to comment on the capital plan as discussed tonight. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for your comment, and we will advise both the town and the schools to get us the plans earlier so we can do that. Thank you. Anybody else? Somebody? Nope. All right, let's go to the next item. What do we have? Finance Committee Liaison Update. I'm just going to quickly go around. Dee, do you have any updates from schools?
The school committee met today from 5 to 6:15. They are all here. So they're really talking about capital planning and their budgets, and when I left, no decisions had been made. So if anybody wants to further comment, please do, from the audience. Any comments? Nope, okay. Thank you.
Tom?
No updates.
Harlan?
I have 3 quick things. The Rec Commission is going to meet next on November 28th, so I don't have an update on them. But I attended several committee meetings. The most interesting was the Board of Assessors meeting. We've heard about the information about the residential tax exemption. Their assumptions that they're going to be presenting at the November 20th Select Board for the rate hearing is based on an assumption that 4,800 people will file for this exemption by April 1. Right now, they have 3,100. Now, this has an impact on the amount of free cash that may be available in the overlay account. If it's less than 4,800, then as I understand, more money will be available in the overlay and more money will go to the free cash. If more than 4,800 people file by April 1, that'll mean less money in the overlay and less money that's available for free cash. So that's my understanding of what happened at the Board of Assessors meeting held on November 9th. Second thing I attended was the Association for Town Finance Committee members. It was their annual meeting. It was on the Saturday, November 4th. About 200 people attended. It was really well done. They had breakout sessions, and I've sent the materials to Parshar, Eric, and to Lois for if anybody wants to see the materials that were presented. The big thing on that is a push, a stress, and a need for 5-year capital plans, how important that is. And I understand that very well. Also, there's a new criteria for the GFAO designation for best practices regarding the organization-wide goals and strategies and performance metrics. So that is an award that I know our town has received for the last 12 years. It is something that is new, for a new criteria for that, dealing with our town budget. That's my report.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Excuse me, Kathy. Housing Authority?
Yes. The most recent update was the meeting of the committee, the 2229 Main Street, and Chris covered that for me. We spoke today, and it looks like it was a very well done presentation. Bottom line for the Finance Committee in the town is that a decision will probably need to be made in the next 12 months as to whether we're going to go forward as a town to acquire the parcel. Is that pretty much the summary?
I'd say that's right. So they want to complete their work by next October. So they would expect to have a recommendation to the select board by then. And included in their analysis will be, acquisition methods, costs to manage it, cost to buy it, and so forth. So the chair, I mentioned that I was from the Finance Committee, suggested that we stay close with them over the next year.
So I guess one question is recommendation as to whether to purchase or not. When would they make recommendations as to what might be done with the land?
Well, they gave some options. I think both will happen.
Yeah.
So I think they'll do both.
Two
Yeah.
different,
So they will have both.
two different
Okay.
tracks, right?
Right.
They were sort of like.
They have
the way
like
you just-
9 groups, and they have all different sub-tracks, but the use of the land, the recommended use of the land will certainly be one of their
And will
recommendations.
be included within the,
I believe so.
okay. Okay. Any
Court, have I
question-
got that right? Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Any questions? I know it's a big deal for the town and the Finance Committee, so everybody should weigh in if there are questions.
Yes.
Good. Eric, Public Works?
No updates.
Lindsay, Planning Board?
No updates. I have to listen to the most recent meeting, so I'm a little behind.
All right, Suresh and Chris, Middle School Building Committee?
There's nothing new on the meeting front since we last met. I know, Suresh, do you have anything?
Nothing from me because I think I had asked you to attend the meeting. I wasn't able to attend last one.
Yeah, and I reported on that last time, so nothing new.
Nothing much there.
Yeah, quasi-economic vitality, anything to report there?
No update. They're meeting tomorrow.
Okay, great. So let's get to the heart of the agenda. Fiscal year 25-29 capital plan. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, right? Cynthia spoke about the recommendations of the long-term planning work group committee. I forget what the name, task force. How can I forget? Yeah. But very quickly, there's sort of a 3-step process is what they were envisioning, right? A meeting of the select board and the school committees early in the fall, review the capital plan, et cetera. Second meeting, which is where we are today, which is Finance Committee, provide review opportunity for us to provide input. Hopefully, the town and the schools will take that input back, revise or not revise their capital plan, followed by a third meeting of the select board and the school committees. And early December was the process. So this is the first year. We will hopefully work out the kinks over time, but hopefully we can incorporate this into our regular budget planning processes as well to improve the planning process, frankly. The committee, work group, what was it, Lori? Task force, there you go, fancy name. But the task force had focused on Tier 3, but as we discussed earlier this summer with the Finance Committee, we thought we should actually focus both on Tier 1, 2, and 3, frankly, and that's what the town and the schools hopefully will provide us insight into. So having said that, let's turn it over to Carrie and Anthony, and then we've got Bob and Lori here. Hopefully we can make this a little bit interactive, frankly, which is why I appreciate both of you guys also being at the table here, and feel free to ask questions as well. So maybe what we might want to do, Kathy, if you can pass one of the mics down there and we can share some of these, that would make it a lot easier. All right. take it away.
All right, great. So you're going to get to hear me for quite a bit, and then Kerry will jump in towards the end of the presentation. So first slide is a slide that just talks about the capital expenditure policy, the 4 criteria. The threshold that we comply with GASB 34, the capital financing and funding, 7 to 8% of the total budget, 5% from debt service, the other from cash, and a 5-year capital improvement plan, which this is. So maintaining our capital infrastructure, the capital investment policy calls for 7 to 8% of the total budget, net of excluded debt, be allocated to 2 to 3% for tier 1 cash, and 5% for tier 2, which is debt within the levy. That graph right there, or that chart, shows the thresholds for what we consider capital projects, although you'll see inside the plan tonight that there will be some that will be below $25,000.
So just if we can go back there, I know last year we had talked a little bit about potentially revising those criteria. Just an update on whether you've made a decision to revise or not to revise, or you're just sticking with what we have for now and then deciding at a later point whether some of these should be updated.
So Kerry and I were having a discussion and going through this. I think that quite a bit of our financial policies have to be reviewed.
Okay.
But we would review them after the budget process and after town meeting.
And reviewed and maybe update them in time for next year's planning?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
You're asking about the tiering system here, though? This is a revision over what the capital planning task force recommended, and I think we talked about this at the last meeting. So the capital planning task force, I think tier 2 was 100,000 to 5 million, right? And this is a revision.
This is a revision to that, but I thought there was also some conversation of whether the 250 should be 500. Am I wrong?
Oh, no.
No? Okay.
No.
So then I'm
we
mistaken.
We just moved that from 100 to
Oh,
250.
okay, so that's what it was. Thank you. Okay. I'll stop asking the question.
Sure, that's fine. So what we do is we send out the documents to all the departments and ask them to submit their requests in. So what this chart shows is the 5-year capital improvement plan, and I call it unvetted because this is what the asks were.
Okay.
So in total for FY '25, the ask totaled $17,193,880, and you can see the out 4 years after that.
And this is 1, 2, and 3?
This is collectively 1, 2.
Thank you.
1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Yes. So breaking it down by department, I'll say the department and I'll read the number if anybody wants.
Hold on, Kathy. You'll have to grab the
Sorry,
mic
Kathy.
for the folks on the...
I see on the prior slide, there's a footnote that says that the tier 2 is understated, and that the town has not yet been able to recommit funding. Can you comment on that,
I'm not quite sure what
Kerry?
slide.
Prior to that.
Oh. So you'll see later on in the slides where, for all of our tier 1 and 2 projects that we requested, we don't have enough funds to fully meet tier 1 and tier 2 projects. So you'll see that later in a slide, and
You don't currently have enough funds?
the town doesn't currently have enough funds for all tier 1 projects, tier 2 projects.
Using the policy,
Using the
that's,
current
right,
policy,
so the
correct.
policy is 7 or 8% of operating budget. If you do that, they don't have enough dough.
So I guess that's a good, and maybe you can educate us on what the plan should be. Is what we're seeing what you will eventually be recommending? Or is it the total needs, recognizing that maybe we may not be able to fund all of it?
I think as we go through the slide deck, that question's going to be answered.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, so this is for each department, and this is what the total requests were. So for the police department, they requested $769,200. For the fire department, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. For the fire department, the request was $537,380. For information technology, the total was $458,000. For planning and land management, the request was for $140,000. For general government was $2,425,000.
Can I ask you a question about that one?
Sure.
This is the total general government. There's a note about Warner's Pond for $1,775,000. Now, do we need to have that in the budget, given the current status of the Warner's Pond
So you'll
investigation?
see in a later slide that I talk about, those were actually already funded in 2 warrant articles. I believe one was in 2020 and one was in 2021. So I will get to that later in the slide deck.
But where's the money, Anthony?
It
So,
was already allocated, so.
but where is it? Is it sitting in unrestricted, like
It's
what?
probably, at this point, it would probably be borrowing authorized.
Unissued
but
debt?
Yeah, unissued debt.
Does that mean it can be unallocated? How does that work?
It can be. You can have a rescission, yeah.
Let's keep going, because you're going to talk about this more?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's keep going.
Facilities, the request was for $1,970,000. For highway maintenance, $1,044,000. For engineering, public works, the request was for $8,614,300.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
The Public Works Engineering, Road Pavement Management, $4,095,000. Isn't that a lot more than last year? Did you boot the roads program from last year, or what's going on with that?
I'm not sure what the request was for last year, but I can say it's probably not enough for what we need to do. So that was his request for this year, and he kind of spread the project out over 5 years. But later on in the presentation, Kerry's going to talk about some Tier 3 and maybe a way to address our roads. Cemetery, the request was for $40,000. And the schools, for the elementary school, if you don't mind, I'll just read it. Is that all right, Laura? Sure. It's $900,000 in total. It's broken down. Elementary, 240, Alcott, 141,000, Thoreau, 156,000, Willard, 40,000, Peabody Building, 25,000, Sanborn Building, 25,000, district-wide, $238,000, and for the Ripley Building, Knox Trail, $35,000, for a total of $900,000.
Okay. I have a question on that. Why items that are less than 25,000 show up on here if they're not capitalizable? It wasn't specific to the schools, but the schools as well. All of their items, even the ones that are over 25, they're calling them Tier 2. They're all less than the 200,000. Why aren't they Tier 1? That might help your problem a little bit. So the 900,000 doesn't look like it meets the qualification for Tier 2. So why don't we include it in Tier 1, A? And B, there's a lot of items on the list for the town that are less than 25,000, which is the minimum for capitalizing it.
So
that's
what
my
I recognize for the practice for handling the schools is that the $900,000 was a Tier 2, considered Tier 2 project in its
Why?
entirety. I can't answer that question.
You know,
That's-
Kerry?
We rely on the schools to provide a capital budget. And so these are the items that the school is submitting for capital for fiscal '25.
Right. But the amounts, none of the amounts hit your threshold for Tier 2, so.
I would agree, and
Okay.
I guess I would defer to the school to respond.
Under a particular tier, we actually hadn't seen the new revised version until the documents came in this past couple of
Yeah.
days.
So it could be Tier 1.
We just submitted the plan,
Yeah.
which is the first of what will be 5 years once we finish our facility study
Okay.
that's undergoing right now. So I think we're here to get all synced up
Yeah,
together.
okay, so it could be Tier 1. That
So
might help
one
you
of
a
the
little bit.
So one of the questions I have, and I think we talked about this last year, but the policy of 900,000 a year, when did that start? Because I think I at least personally would like to urge you to reconsider that, because at the end of the day, if you think about what we do on the operating side, where it's zero-based, automatically allocating 900,000 a year, which is what the practice has been, is not really zero-based. And so I guess the question is, some years, maybe you need 500,000, maybe in other years, you need $1.2 million, if you truly do zero-based. Because it seems like we've got a $900,000 bucket, and then we go scrambling to try to figure out, well, I mean, so I.
was a standing practice upon my arrival here 7 years ago, so that's.
But I'm urging us to revisit that.
Let me answer the
Yeah.
rest of it. We're always in need beyond the 900,000. So we actually work to stay within that and then spread it out over years, so we don't ask for big warrant articles. We can all just talk together on whether we want to keep doing that.
Well, this goes to the question I asked the town, right? I mean, I think a capital plan ought to have, hey, here's our total needs. We may not be able to afford all of it, to your point, in any given year, but this is what we're anticipating. And then you decide, prioritize within there, how much you can afford in a given year, recognizing sometimes you might have to defer, maybe other years you might not. But this way, I mean, if you only have items that add up to 900,000, it's hard to identify what the items.
We've got the list, so you've
Sorry?
got the priority needs, and there are probably others we could have included, but we've stayed within the 900. Those are pretty basic things you'll see there this year. We're deferring any major projects until the capital facility study is complete, and then we can sit with you and the rest of the school committee and scale it out over time.
So once that's done, we'll have a larger list of here's the complete.
It's meant to build a 5 and probably more year plan.
Okay.
Very thoroughly. All the buildings are now about 20 years
Mhm.
old or so, and this is K8, K5 really, right? Pre-K5. So trying to just be sure we're not missing any major thing and get the lay of the land for our sakes, for your sake, and can be really informed going forward.
Don, were you going to say something? On the
I still didn't get an answer to my other question, which is why are there items that look, if they're not capitalizable, why aren't they in the operating budget? Why are they here?
So Tier 1, the only Tier 1 funding that exists is within the town's guidelines budget. So we're not issuing debt, we're
Right.
paying cash. We've just traditionally called that Tier 1, and it's funded within, we haven't traditionally called, it's,
Okay.
you know, we used to call it capital outlay, but it was cash,
Okay.
and so it's not capital, it's really
Okay.
not capitalized.
It's really not, so it's,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, I do have a question too.
To Chris's point, for example, in the fire department, there's a line item for a pump that's $8,000. Should that not be on this page for Tier 2?
It's not Tier 2. We don't have, which page are you?
I'm looking at page,
That's actually part of the ALS, the IV pump for the ambulance.
Oh, the ambulance thing.
It depends on the ALS, the.
Yeah, the three items together.
Advanced Life Support Service.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so that's, there's further decisions have to be made with ALS. So I think the chief was just grouping them together, because collectively, that's part of the whole.
that's his ask.
Right.
But it's Tier 1, it's
Right.
not Tier 2.
So Carrie, what you were saying is it's pretty much, either way, it's operating budget.
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
So
Yeah, hold on. Dee and then Don.
Yeah, I have maybe a more fundamental question. If we're talking about the towns and we're talking about the schools, why are the costs associated with the schools under the town budget?
Which costs?
The ones that we're looking at right now. Some of these costs are under the town budget, right?
The capital, there's
The
a.
Tier 1, Tier 2 costs fall under the town budget.
No,
They do not.
they do not.
Where
There
do
is-
they show up on the budget in the school bucket?
There is a separate capital article for the schools,
There is a separate okay,
yes.
okay.
But it's
So
a
is
Tier
it-
2, it's a Tier 2 article.
Okay, so Tier 1 articles, where are they combined or not?
There are two,
Like the 900,000, where is that under whose purview? I mean, it's under the school's purview, but does that come in under the town's budget or under the school's budget?
so there are two typically 2 warrant articles for capital, one for town and one for CPS.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Don.
So I just want to be sure I properly interpreting things here. You gave a definitional slide showing tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and that's per project, not per department, correct? So if we were to go through these line items, the vast majority of this is tier 1. So I think it'd be helpful to see what the expense budget total looks like. I mean, I assume you've done that because you said in that slide 2 to 3% is tier 1. So can we cut to the chase with this committee and say, yes, we can expense all of these and they're
It's in a
within
later
our
slide.
2 to 3%.
So that's
Thank you.
addressed in a later slide.
Yeah.
Thanks, okay.
Actually, the next slide.
So this is just, this next slide is just a summary. This is all of the asks unvetted, broken down by tiers. So this says, as you can see, the first slide when I talked about the $17 million.
Yep.
Collectively, this is how it breaks down into tiers.
So can I just make a request? Lori, when you guys present to the select board and to the school committees in December, I know you haven't done it here, but can you break out the 900,000 the same way we have on tier 1, tier 2, the next, which slide did you just show, Anthony? If they were numbered, no, the one after that. You've got it broken out nicely, tier 1 and tier 2. Yes. Sorry?
They're all tier
All
1.
of your 900,000 would be all tier 1?
Yep.
This
Yep.
year.
Okay, so let's just, if we can call it that, that would be helpful, just because trying to compare apples to apples here, right? And that would be good, thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so for the funding plan for tier 1, with 2% of the prior year's general fund levy, that would be a benchmark of $2,115,774, and at 3%, it would be $3,173,661, and that's the tier 1 benchmarks for the 2 and the 3%. And for the tier 2 benchmark of 5% for debt service would be $5,289,435.
So you have both a 2% and a 3%. Are you recommending one over the other, or not?
In a later slide, I'm recommending slightly above the 2%.
Okay.
But this is my plan, and Kerry still has to go through it, and it's work that still has to be worked on.
Okay.
Okay, so with the tier 1 projects of $3,925,880 at the 2% benchmark, it shows that we don't have enough money to fund all those projects to the tune of $1,810,106 at 2%. And at 3%, if we were to go to 3%, we'd still be short $752,219. For tier 2, total projects totaling $9,173,000 with that 5% benchmark, $5,289,435. We are short $3,883,565. So now what I do is, for the past couple of weeks, I met with departments and kind of sat down and vetted the projects and went through and had conversations. And together, this is the recommended projects. So for the police department, of the $769,200 worth of projects, recommended $419,200 for tier 1, tier 2, $350,000. For the fire department, their request was for $537,380, of which recommended on tier 1, $89,800. Nothing on tier 2, and I recommended ARPA for $208,480.
One question, Anthony, on that, on the truck. So they're going to take that money out of 24? So Kerry, can we do that? I mean, that's a little, that's money that it wasn't budgeted in 24, but we're going to scoop it anyway?
You know, my opinion, if a department had the additional funds available and we don't have enough money to fund all the projects and there's still a need, why not consider that? I think that that's still a discussion that we have to have with the town manager, but that's what my recommendation would be, is that if they could fund it, it might make sense to do that.
Maybe. I kind of like it coming back and then talking about what the priorities are versus a department saying, that's mine. Yeah?
Right. Yeah, and it's still a policy decision that the town manager would have to decide on.
Can I ask a question about the police? You've got a $350,000 allocation for the records management system upgrade. What is that?
So that's,
IMS, right?
yeah, that's to upgrade their system they use called IMS. So it's in desperate need to be updated, and that's basically, that's our public safety dispatch and everything that goes with it. So it's time for an upgrade.
I have one other question, which is, with this fiscal year 25.
IMC,
No,
IMS.
I said I am.
That's right.
Oh, that's okay. You guys are all, okay.
good.
I just have a question about, with FY '25, are we really catching up on things that haven't been funded in the past years, or are we still delaying, and how far out are we going until we actually catch up?
Some of the projects, from my understanding, sitting down with departments that were deferred last year were brought back this year. You know, and then looking at them, we tried to take that into consideration, that if we pushed them off from last year, that they jump ahead.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you know, the departments really play a big part in determining what their most important need is, and maybe last year's need is not as important as something that came up for next year. So we leave that up to the departments to really determine.
Okay, and how are they feeling about their allocations? Are they, are they saying we're still really far behind, we really are almost caught up with what the needs are, or not?
We have a great team, and I think that they understand the pressures that we have in trying to fund everything, but would they like to have more? Absolutely.
Well, everybody would like to have more. I'm just saying, though, we have real needs, and are those real needs being met?
I would say, based on the request, no. I think that if we really truly want to meet the needs, then we need to fund the plan in its entirety, but most communities can't, and we go through this exercise.
Okay, thank you.
Can you guys on Zoom hear Anthony and Carrie, or no? Because they're sharing one mic, so I just want to make sure everybody can hear them.
Yeah, we're able to hear them. Yes. I can hear them.
Okay, perfect.
Lori was harder to hear than they are.
I can hear them both fine.
The mic wasn't on until Carlin got up and turned it on, so it should be better now.
Into the mic, Kathy.
I have a question. The 900 for the schools is in the Tier 2 bucket on the schedules.
Yes.
And I think we talked earlier that it should be over in the Tier 1, so that's going to change. You're going to have some tweaks to your calculation.
Thank you.
Just, it should help the $9 million.
Sure, well, perhaps.
Except we have not ever funded that $900,000 out of Tier 1. So
Right.
it's simple to move it over, but to actually fund it is another story.
So it's always been borrowed, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that explanation, Carrie.
Information technology, 458,000, recommended 258,000 for Tier 1, 0 for Tier 2, and opera for $100,000. For Public Works Facilities, the request was for $1,970,000, of which the recommended Tier 1 was $100,000. Nothing was recommended at this point for Tier 2 or opera, and further looking at other funding sources where some of those are rec buildings or playing fields that we look at possibly recreation retained earnings, CPC, or some other funding source.
Question about that? Can you explain a little bit more further about what do you mean by recommend recreation funds?
you want me to?
You want to take that?
Yeah, so our recreation operation is funded through a revolving fund. There is a bylaw that established that revolving fund, and that revolving fund talks about recreation funding both operating and capital maintenance costs. But we have either gotten away or never really assigned those capital costs to the rec revolving fund. And so I have a meeting or a time on their agenda. You mentioned their meeting in 2 weeks, and we're going to start talking about that. So that is where that funding might come from.
And the townhouse HVAC, we're just not going to do it?
So one of the concerns that we have, that we just need to do further investigation, because this building is not fully compliant with ADA or AAB standards. So there's a 5-year look-back period on the money that was spent in this building. And if it reaches above the 30% threshold, then the entire building needs to be brought up to code. So I don't know where that 825,000, so we really need to do some more homework before we commit to.
What do you mean, what's the 30% threshold? Can you just explain that?
That's part of the ADA, and I could take that offline with you if you want to.
Okay, that's fine.
The last question for this slide is, are we expending all the ARPA funds now this year in FY '25, or will we still have some for a subsequent year?
So this plan contemplates that 50% of the fiscal '25 allocation would be used for capital. So there is another 600,000 or 700,000 or so, and then a full 1.3 million for fiscal '26.
How much? 3.1 million? 1.3 million?
I think I said 1.3.
Oh, okay.
But we do like the 3.1.
I know, really.
So you have enough money to fund the items that you've put in here for ARPA, right? And does the rec fund have enough money to fund all these things?
That would be a very big hit.
Yeah.
So there'll be more review of that list,
That's
yeah?
a little optimistic.
Okay,
Yeah, we'd have to still come up with a plan for that.
okay.
I think I went through engineering, right?
No, you
Oh, I
didn't.
didn't. I'm sorry. All right, so engineering, $8,614,300, of which recommended for Tier 1 is $676,300. Tier 2 is $3 million, and ARPA is $257,000, and other $650,000 comes from Chapter 90 funds.
Is it fully covered by Chapter 90?
Yes.
It is, okay. So they got 2.6 million versus the recommended 4.1 million, so that's the biggest cut in the plan?
That's correct,
Yeah.
So when it says defer to fiscal year '26 on that line, is the defer refer to the difference between the ask and what you're planning to give in '25?
So later on, when we get to Tier 3, Kerry's going to talk about some more,
Oh, I see what you mean, defer to fifth because it's potential Tier 3.
Yeah.
Got it, thank you.
parks and trees under Public Works. The request was for $296,000, of which recommended funding at Tier 1 was $196,000, nothing for Tier 2, and $100,000 for ARPA.
Question about that?
Sure.
The field replacement, Doug White Field, $100,000 from ARPA. What is that? Is that replacing it with artificial turf or something else?
So that is the turf field, and it's in really, really, really bad shape. Turf field is generally should be replaced after 10 years. My understanding that field is going on somewhere above 15 years to 18 years. The Public Works does a great job patching it, but it's to the point now where the town should be concerned with liability, because that field needs to be addressed one way or another.
Okay, follow-up. So does that mean the town is authorizing money to replace the Doug White fields with artificial turf next year?
It's just to do the study to determine.
So it's a study to do
Yeah.
it? Okay.
A design study, yes. The cemetery, $40,000. It's recommended that that be used, come out of their cemetery perpetual care funds. Public Works, Highway and Maintenance, the request was for $1,044,000, of which $294,000 is recommended for Tier 1, $750,000 recommended for Tier 2.
Sorry, before we move on, just a question about the previous one. The one on the field, that was $100,000 to do the study, or was that $100,000 to do the work?
Well, no, the work is probably going to be close to $1 million, I would say, to replace the carpet, if that's the route that the town decides to do. The $100,000 is for study design to determine what it would truly cost to have that replaced.
Understood, thank you.
10%.
Are they going to be looking at options, like, rather than just do a turf again? Are they going to be looking at,
Well, I think if you talk
Sod?
if you talk to Parks, I think that field is heavily used, and certainly turf lends itself to that type of use. But I think there might be some, other questions that have been brought up into town as far as concerns that folks may have with turf fields.
right? I thought we had an article, like, in the last year or two on that. Didn't we?
Well, CPA did. CPC funds.
To not utilize these.
Okay, I'll let it go.
Peggy Briggs has her hand up.
Yeah.
Peggy has her hand.
Peggy, go ahead, please. Peggy, go ahead, thank you.
Yeah, I have a really general question. If the money in a capital project, Tier 1 mainly, does not get spent, does that go into free cash? As if it were operational, especially there was an earlier question about, really lower level things that are showing up in the capital improvement. And so, for example, a $10,000 Public Works, Parks and Trees, if that doesn't get spent, does that money roll over in capital, or does it go to free cash?
It rolls over from year to year, Peggy. So normally my practice in other communities I've been in is to review prior capital projects. If a project was out there and not completed after 3 years tops, then I would look to repurpose those capital funds at town meeting to other needs that the town has.
So just on a policy question, to go back, I think earlier in the conversation, there was something about the different, some projects being put into Tier 1 that were below the threshold of capital, and should they really be operational, and if they don't get spent, in my mind, go to free cash rather than kind of conserved in a capital account. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Peggy, in other communities that I've been in, they have a portion of the operating budget called capital outlay. And some of the smaller projects that are put in part of the budget process. That's not what our policy calls for. That's why I mentioned to Kerry, maybe off cycle, that we review our policies and maybe we consider doing something like that. And that maybe addresses some of those smaller $10,000 or $25,000 asks that are really more maintenance related and supply costs that, personally I think would be better in the operating budget, but that's not for me to determine. That's policy for determine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we did highway. Planning and land management, $140,000 recommended, all of that funded from Tier 1. In the general government, the ask was for $2.4 million, of which nothing was recommended for Tier 1 and Tier 2. And reason being is $100,000 for the DC fast charging station was for ARPA. The other, as I mentioned, Warner's Pond remediation was already funded under 2 articles, totaling 1.7 for that exact dollar amount. So I think that they were kind of maybe bringing that to my attention. Stormwater management was handled under the DPW engineering capital. The pedestrian, bike, and safety update was also in the DPW engineering budget. So those were just put in two different places, so I eliminated them out of the general government category. Same with the last two as well.
Question about the stormwater management. Is the Public Works Department coming up with a revolving fund or some type of special revenue fund for that, for stormwater?
Yeah, they are working on it, and that's part of the reason why I didn't fund some of those requests, because that utility fee would offset and pay for some of those projects. So they're expecting to, Ellen tells me, early part of 2024 to start bringing something forward for discussion. They are working on that.
Can I just ask a question about the charging system? How many buses can that charge in a day?
I think there's different infrastructure.
It's a fast charger you're getting, right?
Yeah, but that particular one, it's more, I'm not sure how the buses work. I think that they need a larger infrastructure. I could be wrong. I don't know enough about that. But the one that they're asking for, the reason why I put it under opera, I'm not quite sure, it's $100,000. Plus, I think there's Green Communities grants that I'd like to see us try to utilize before we use our funds, or at least get some kind of portion of that paid for. So that's why I kicked that to opera, because I think that a further discussion needs to be, and further funding needs to be looked at, rather than committing town funds for that right off the bat.
Okay.
And this is at the Public Safety Building.
Right.
It is, oh, it's at
Yes.
the Public Safety Building. Okay, okay. Thank you.
So that means it's designed just for the public safety vehicles, or is it for the public as well?
Well, those charging stations that I've seen are designed for regular motor vehicles. I don't honestly know what a bus charger even looks like, and I'm not sure.
That's a different discussion, Anthony.
Yeah, it is.
We could
So
spend an hour.
we don't have an answer, and I'm sure, I guess that.
We're pretty versed in it, but I don't know if it's not in our plan. I don't know if you want to go there tonight.
Wow.
But this is a level 3 charger for public safety vehicles, not
Okay.
for
Okay.
public.
Oh, it's not for public, and it's not for the buses?
No.
Oh, all right. You don't have one? I know that had been a discussion point.
We do
One
have
of the
some.
meetings.
We have, yeah.
You do?
We do.
You
We
do
have
have.
electric buses, and we have.
I know you have electric buses, but do you have a fast charger for
We
them?
do not have a
Can
fast
can we move on to keep talking about the capital stuff versus the electric stuff?
Well, those are
Other stuff.
capital costs.
Well, but if it's not in the plan, let's keep going.
All right, collectively, I think we've talked about the schools quite a bit, and that 900,000 is funded tier 2.
So I had a general question related to what Peggy said about all tier 2. So for tier 2, we're borrowing the money, right? Or not all of tier 2, but most tier 2, is that right? Some tier 2 is sometimes not borrowed, is that right?
Plan, as you'll see in later slides, calls for $5 million.
Okay, so of the $5 million that gets borrowed, what happens if it's not spent on that capital project? Does it roll over like you said you do with the tier 1, or what happens there?
It does roll over, but we wouldn't issue the debt until the project was ready. So at any point in time, if, we could rescind that debt at town meeting
Yep.
and then repurpose that down the road.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's helpful. Can we go back to the slides where the schools number was, the 900,000? Because we went by pretty quickly, and I just had a couple of questions on some of the items there. So, it's page 11. It's page 11 and 12. Actually, 12, I think, is the two questions I had on page 12 of the PDF that we received. It's the second slide, or I guess it's, second slide for the school stuff. So there's two items there were reserved. They're contingency funds. So we're borrowing $40,000 for contingency funds? Help me understand why we would be doing that. And it says this is the one for Peabody and Sanborn. Reserve for life safety and health, contingency for aging.
Yeah, so it's.
So why borrow money for in case we need it versus look it under the
I
cushions
can't
during
speak to the
year?
financing, but I can speak to the request. Every year, there's been 100,000 total, 50 per school, to keep those buildings online, because
with the age of them, it's very unpredictable what could happen. We dropped the number in half because we're going to move out partway through the year. So Carrie can talk on the financing side of
I
it.
mean, why would we not just say that, we'll find the money somewhere? I mean, there's,
Sure, there's that unlevy, that 4.5% of unused levy capacity that was a great idea. I'm not saying that we recommend it, I don't recommend it, I don't like the idea, but if you want to tap into that 4.5, I think that's
well,
great.
I guess, just on principle, it kind of seems weird that we're going to borrow money just in case we need it, and at a time when
We wouldn't borrow it.
you would only
We
borrow it
wouldn't
if you
borrow
need
in
it?
advance. We
Right.
would borrow it if we needed
When
it.
it becomes necessary.
This really presses a question in the back of my mind, which is that the length of the debt shouldn't exceed the useful life of what we borrow it for.
That's correct.
So if the school's gonna be knocked down
How
in 6 months,
frequently
we
they
have a
borrow.
6-month loan, it doesn't make
How
sense, that's the
frequently they borrow, I
expense,
don't know.
right? Okay.
I don't disagree.
And in general, as I'm going through this, some of our items that are less than 250,000 have a useful life of 10 years. It could be capitalized. Other items that are being capitalized, borrowed, Tier 2, have a very short useful life. So I think we, as taxpayers, don't want to be paying 5 years down the road after the value has left.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, John. Matter of fact, that's why I started saying that I think that we should relook at all our policies.
Great, thanks. I'm with you.
So we also legally can't borrow for a term longer than the useful life. So
Right.
just because something is showing in a particular, in a tier 2, doesn't mean it can be borrowed or that it would stay there.
So then how does that work for these contingency funds? So you borrow when you need it. So do you, I mean,
If you need it.
if you need it, but then if you need 50,000 or 25, you just roll that borrowing into a larger number, or do you issue a specific, I'm trying to, like, what's the practice?
It has to be Tier 1.
Well, but it's not. It's Tier 2. We just heard it's Tier 2 in practice. I'm just trying to understand the mechanics down,
Borrowing
right?
within the year, that's what he's asking. If they need 15,000.
So we would need to know what it's for.
Yep.
We have to get a legal opinion
Okay.
from bond counsel determining that the useful life exceeds the borrowing. So we would need to know how that money was being used.
So
Okay.
if they wanted $15,000 to repair a sidewalk, you would have to get a legal opinion on the 15 grand?
We get a legal opinion on each bond issue in total, and they review all of the items.
My question, Carrie, is where does the 15,000 come from? You're not going to do a bond issue for $15,000.
It's collective with all the other capital.
Yeah, it's
projects.
rolled
It's fine.
together into
It's
one
all
issue
rolled
is what you're
together,
doing?
right.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, we'd roll it
That's the
together.
question I was trying to ask. Is it rolled together with a few others, basically?
Right. Or we could ban some of it and then bond later, so there's options.
And I'm curious, if we considered it operating, would we still need some legal opinion or no?
No, it's just for borrowing.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So administrative wise, it almost seems easier just to say we're gonna call it operating and figure out where the money comes from later versus borrowing, right? It would be administratively easier.
But it might not be.
The question of whether they have the cash, right? That's the issue.
understand that
Yeah,
part, but we
yeah. I guess
always-
that's the
We
issue.
almost always end up,
Yeah.
between the schools and the towns, there's
Yeah.
always cash at the end of the year, as we found.
Yeah, at the end, I don't know if they, I mean, that's, I don't understand necessarily the cash
management,
flow,
yeah.
how it works, right?
Well, can I suggest then, Prasha, that we would then look at some of the items we were going to expense in Tier 1 and say, this actually has a 5-year useful life or 10-year life. We can move that into the capital plan and free up those funds for the expense. I think that
The royal we're not doing it, they are.
just saying that, it's great to be expensing everything up to 250,
Yeah.
but some of that could be capitalized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And within a given budget, I'm sure there.
yeah.
Suresh has his hand up.
Oh, Suresh, go ahead. Thank you.
I have a quick question, a general question. Of all the projects that are related to fields, whether school projects or town projects, can those be used from, applied towards the funding from the CPA or CPC fundings?
Yes.
If they're
Yeah,
recreational.
the white fields were mostly funded through CPC.
Okay.
I mean, mostly funded.
You'll be a real estate investor, full-time real estate investor. A few different strategies that exist. You have your cash flow investor.
Who's this?
Who's speaking?
Kazi's here.
Oh, Kazi, oh, okay. Yeah, I have a question. So to summarize, Anthony, so there's about 17.2 million in spending across all the levels that's recommended. 10.5 of it is being funded either from the budget, ARPA, or other. And 6.7 million gets deferred. The majority of that is within engineering, and it's mostly roads. Is that a good summary?
The 17 million was the total ask, so that's, what's getting recommended is somewhere in the vicinity of $7.2 million moving forward, a combination of tier 1 and tier 2. And
For budget?
And some ARPA too, yeah. So
And 2.5 million in other, right? So that adds up to 10 million, right? So there's 10 million you actually want to fund. But I think, okay, so 17 million. I think the 17 million, if you include the pond piece, the dam removal,
Right.
that's actually what's in your when you total the recommended, it's 17 million.
No, there was already, it's not recommended, no. It's not what I said.
Okay, no, but I added up your recommended columns, and I think
That was the asks.
No, it's not the ask. Okay, well, I did the math, so it looks to me like there's a pretty big deferral. Most of it is in engineering.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, so Kerry or Anthony, so from a town priority perspective, that's a lot of deferral in the engineering space. That's also the place that we've deferred before. So how are you feeling about this level of deferral for infrastructure? So going back to your strategic priorities, right? I know you've been talking about infrastructure. So is this satisfying, or are we sort of falling further behind when you look at this?
We have a couple of slides to address that.
Okay.
A few slides out.
Okay. Thank you.
So for the funding for tier 1, the funding plan, at that 2% benchmark, that would be, what's being recommended is $2,173,300, of which at the 2%, we would fall short $57,526, but I would recommend that we're slightly going over the 2% and funding the $2,173,300 for tier 1. And for the ARPA, it's $765,480. And on the tier 2, the request was the $9 million plus, of which the recommendation is to move forward with $5 million. At the 5% threshold, that's a little over 5 million, it's 5.2, and we feel comfortable sticking with the $5 million and leaving $289,000 as below the 5% threshold benchmark.
Okay, question, just so I understand how that slide works. The requested for engineering was 4,113,000, and the recommended for tier 2 is $3 million, so the difference of a little over $1 million there?
Correct.
Okay, and that's essentially amounts that are not being funded.
Correct. Some late information that we received after this was planned was the Council on Aging is still looking for a new transport van bus for $130,000. Veterans Agent, a new electric vehicle, $35,000. Town Clerk is looking for a poll place scanner and tabulator for $8,500. And then the library is looking for a new electric delivery and maintenance van for $45,000 and computer equipment totaling $15,000.
So you're gonna, those are in the they're gonna be in the recommended pile?
Next revision,
Okay.
we'll have to include those.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm going to turn it over to Kerry to talk about future Tier 3 projects. I think the superintendent also has something to discuss.
So as we talked about last year, the town has significant building needs. We have big issues at the Public Works complex over on Kais Road, the Public Safety Building. And we, back in 2020, we did a facility study. We looked at all 14 of our locations. We have 18 buildings on 14 locations in town. And we had an architect design 3 different scenarios for future use of each of those buildings. We have not made a whole lot of progress on that, but we do have now a total of $300,000 that has been set aside in a couple of different funding rounds to do some feasibility work. And we are going to be looking both at public works and public safety because there are potential opportunities to combine on one site versus trying to rebuild or do significant renovations on multiple sites. So we are hoping to launch that work yet this year, and so we don't yet have any timetable on when we might be coming to the town looking for what will be significant funding for those facilities. So I'm just reporting there's really not been a whole lot of progress other than the building's aged another year since we talked about this last. But I did want to talk to you about the public works infrastructure. So I think we can just skip to those slides. And I wanted to talk to you about a concept. And this is something that I actually did in the community that I worked in now a long time ago, because I've been here for 7 years too. But we have significant deferred maintenance with our roads.
Is this in our packet, this slide?
No, it's not.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Okay,
This
it's
was
not.
a late edition.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Just know where to go. Okay.
We'll mail out the updated version.
Yeah, no, I just didn't want to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Thanks.
So for the last several years, we have been funding anywhere between $2 and $3 million per year for roads maintenance. I think when I started in town 7 years ago, our pavement condition index, which is a grade that we give to roads, was probably in the high 70s, and now it's at best in the high 60s. And that means over time, our average road condition has deteriorated. And you drive on roads, so I'm sure you've noticed over time the roads are not what they used to be even a few years ago. And I think, Carlin, you had asked, is the $4 million ask for fiscal '25, is that different than what has been asked in the past? And it really isn't different. We've never come close to funding what the ask has been. I think the difference is you probably haven't seen the ask before, but it's always been there. So the amount of money that is needed is significant on an annual basis, and it is difficult to allocate additional funding given the model that we're working with. So the idea, or an idea for funding, is to look at, and I know this slide is hard to read, but
Let's go with the concept
Yeah, the
first.
concept.
yeah, so we've talked, you've seen the forecast, your last couple of meetings, you've seen the forecast, so you may recall that when we get into the second 5 years of the forecast, we start seeing a reduction in retirement assessment, in the OPEB assessment. And in addition, once the OPEB liability has been satisfied, we will then be pulling money from the OPEB trust fund to pay the cost of retiree health benefits. And I'm not sure that we talked about that piece so much. But you see in fiscal years 30 to 34, the last half of this forecast, that there is significant dollars associated with those costs that we won't have, because we will be pulling from other places to fund that. So what I would propose is that we think about allocating that money to road maintenance. And we're paying cash versus borrowing. But fiscal 30 is a couple of years away. What I did in a community I worked in before is we put forward a debt exclusion and said, okay, we need to cover 3, 4, 5 years. We had a certain amount of money here. If we're talking about 6 years, we could be talking about $25 to $30 million. It's significant, but you could put that forward to town meeting and a debt exclusion to the voters and say, would you be willing to approve a debt exclusion to cover road maintenance? And you could be very specific about what you're doing, which is what we did where I was before. We identified every single road and which year it was going to be funded, and use that. And then when you get to year 6, then you're switching over to paying for that with cash. So that's the basic concept. On the next page, and these are for illustration purposes only.
Roger, before we move to the next page, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Or do you want to hold?
Yeah, go ahead, Amrith.
So I just want to understand what you're suggesting here. Are you saying that the roads have deteriorated and we're making a plan for something in 5 years? I don't think that's what you're saying, so I think I misunderstood it. So
yeah, Amrit, so I am for sure saying the roads are deteriorating. We need to dedicate additional funding to roads, but because we are limited in the first half of this forecast period, there is one potential way to address this would be to authorize a bond issue in some amount to cover the annual funding for some period of time, up to 5 or 6 years, to get us to a point where we have the cash capacity to address maintenance going forward.
could I ask the question maybe a different way and say, have we looked at what it would take if we want to bring our roads to an acceptable level? And what is the plan we would make? Somebody just switched the slide, so I can't see the room at this point. If we were to look at what it was going to take to get our roads to what we think is an acceptable level and what it's going to take to maintain them at that level, what is it going to cost?
Yeah, so
And how are we going to fund that?
So that is in the $4 to $6 million per year range. And that would be for road maintenance. And then, there's additional sidewalk and guardrails, and then you could get into traffic improvements and that. But to maintain pavement, $4 to $6 million a year.
For 6
Thank
years.
you.
So
4 to
Carrie,
6
is
in
the limitation that would avoid is the tier 2 limit because excluded debt is outside of that? Is that why you're going to borrow? I'm trying to understand why that's the way to do it.
Yeah, so it could be done either within the levy, and we would essentially immediately be in the position of needing an override if budgets are growing more than 2.5, or excluded debt, and you preserve that levy limit. And the reason I put forward the excluded debt is just because then you're going to the voters and asking them at the ballot, given everything you've already committed to, are you willing to make this additional commitment for road maintenance?
Yeah, hold on. Carlin, you had a question?
This is something I think our committee should talk about, just the basic concept of what happens when your OPEB obligation is reduced. I know at today's school committee meeting, they're talking about doing the very same thing with their OPEB trust and applying those extra funds, about $125,000, I think is what they're currently thinking about each year, to something else in their general account. Now, that is something that we can do also, I think, but I just don't know how this committee feels. I think we should talk about how we feel about what to do with the, I'll call it extra OPEB obligations? What's a better way of looking at it?
Savings.
Hold on. Kathy, hold on. Don had a question, and then we'll go to Kathy.
well, first, Carl and I agree, we need to discuss this for sure. But Carrie, my question for you is, if we have a $4 to $6 million annual cost of maintaining what we have, am I understanding you're correctly to say that you think we could finance that through debt until the OPEB, till some other expense goes away, which has nothing to do with the roads, right? And sort of in our minds, I guess, pre-commit our funding in the future from that, once that expense is gone. To my mind, these are two totally unrelated things. And if the roads are not, if we could do one bond debt that would bring our roads up to where they need to be, and they has a useful life that's in agreement with the duration of the debt, that to me would be much more appealing than this notion of this actually should be expensed, but we can't, so we want to borrow every year for the next 5 years until we think we can expense it, because it just doesn't feel like correct stewardship of capital. That's all.
Okay. So,
Agreed.
hold on. Peggy had a question, and then we'll go to, I don't know whether it was Amherst or someone else. Peggy?
Peggy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Peggy, hold on. Kathy, and then Peggy. Sorry. Go ahead, Kathy.
My comment is that in the future, in 2030, if those expenses go away, then town's expenses go down.
That's correct.
And
Kathy, is your mic on?
it was. Now, is that better?
That is so much better, thank you.
Okay. My question was, in 2030, it sounds like an expense goes away, so potentially our taxes could go down. Are we assuming that the tax rate just stays the same? Is that why you're looking at that as a trade-off?
So I'm putting forward a proposal to fund
roads, okay.
a liability that we have, and it is different. But it is a way to fund maintenance that is deferred, and if we don't commit additional funding to roads, they are going to deteriorate further.
Do you know how much the hit would be to?
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
Peggy?
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, I've got three things. One, I think I mentioned this before. I mean, the other alternative would be to reduce our OPED funding now, stretch that out, and pay for the roads. Secondly, in 2030, there'll be something else. We know that. So it doesn't mean that money is just going to be sitting around waiting for roads. And if it was, are roads the number one priority? So it's not our policy decision. I suppose it's the select board or whatnot, but I would query, why don't we just borrow for 10 years and get the roads done and not pre-commit savings that are going to evaporate before the time comes. Thank you.
Amherst and then Chris. Yeah.
So just quickly, I think what Peggy, Don, Carden, and I are kind of saying is that if there's excess money in some account, whatever it is, let's not try and make local optimizations on how we're going to expend that. Let's maybe bring that back to a common pool and figure out what the best place is to invest or expend those funds townwide. And to what Peggy just said, are roads the thing you would do it on? And to what Carlin said, can we bring those monies back if there's, quote, savings, rather than try and say we're going to use them on roads? I'm not saying we shouldn't invest in roads, but I'm saying, could we make the decision holistically for the town rather than saying we got the saving here, let's expend it there? That's all.
Chris, and then I had one question.
Yeah. How much would you want to borrow?
Well, I just modeled
Yeah.
$30 million.
And is this the same time when we might want the police and fire building? Is it
It's
around the same
Yeah,
time?
it is, it's around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
So that'll bump the rate a bit, huh? The
So-
taxes. So that's why I'm for funding the roads. So I applaud you for pushing it. I don't know if I'm comfortable with this answer. I'd want to look at more things, but
Yeah.
I agree, we need to figure out a way to get caught up on the roads.
So my recommendation from the conversations we had last year was that there was significant interest in additional funding for roads. In addition, interest in paying cash versus borrowing.
Yes.
And so that's why this is being put forward
Yeah.
as an option.
So just two questions, process-wise. Do you have more on the concept? I see some other
No, I mean, the,
numbers up there, so
Yeah,
just before we
this
ask
is-
questions or,
this is
'cause-
just, what it would look like.
okay.
This is
but
very,
this is hypothetical.
right.
Okay,
And
fair
it's
enough.
very rough.
Okay.
So,
So,
it's.
but that was the general concept?
Yeah.
Okay, and then, you had a question?
I just had I do actually have a question. I remember at a previous meeting, when we were talking about buildings, it came up that, and bonding, that something goes off, we've paid off one of our debts, and it was 2031, and that would have been the time in which we would be looking at a new building for the police and fire. And you had
Yeah,
mentioned that.
Alcott and Thoreau.
Well, this was, anyway, and you had made that comment, and I'm just wondering, are you still thinking in that direction so that doesn't interfere with the road maintenance at this time?
The debt service for the elementary schools, 27, 28, 29, that's when that starts being satisfied.
Yeah.
So that's when we were talking about a building.
Okay, so it wouldn't be until like 2031, maybe? 2030,
No, we will be
2031.
proposing some building project as soon as 2028, 2029, in that time period.
Okay.
And it will be a stretch for us to wait that long,
yeah.
but that's kind of what we've
okay.
been targeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, let me just leave with one final thought, because I agree with many of the comments around, prioritizing what we want to spend versus pre-funding, particularly since, knock on wood, most of us won't be on the Finance Committee in 2030. But I'm a little, I guess my question, I think, and I find it troubling to give an opinion on this concept of borrowing right now, particularly in light of the fact that we're next going to talk about public works facility that we might have to borrow for, et cetera, and try to prioritize among those. I'm wondering, is it possible, or let me rephrase the question. At what point would you envision coming to the Finance Committee, the Select Board, with and don't take this the wrong way, but like a real actual proposal to do the borrowing, right? I'm trying to separate the borrowing, which I'm kind of ambivalent on, particularly it's hard to figure out what else we might have to borrow for and what time frame. So I'll reserve judgment on whether it's even a good idea to borrow for maintenance, for street maintenance, versus the second half of the proposal, which is to say, hey, we have potential future savings. Let's use those to pay for maintenance, which theoretically I'm all for, but who knows what's going to happen in 2030, frankly. So I'd rather actually have a focused discussion around, hey, we'd like to borrow X million dollars for this term, and here's other things that we will also be borrowing for in anticipation of over the next 10 years or 15. And then I think we can provide some useful input, hopefully, around whether we think it's appropriate to borrow for street funding versus other needs. Does that make sense, what I just said, or no? Was I clear or no?
I think I understood it.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Is that okay, Carrie?
So,
No?
does that, I mean, are you anticipating coming to town meeting with a proposal to borrow? Which would be fine, but.
Yeah,
just-
I
it's
think
just something-
we're fairly certain that we would be putting something together for
Okay.
the 2024 town meeting.
Okay,
It would be helpful to understand which direction the Finance Committee thinks we should be going for funding road maintenance.
at least for the next few years.
Yes.
Okay, that I think we can provide, and I think, one of the things that we have on the meeting after next week, whatever day that is to actually provide input on the capital plan as well as set the final guidelines. So I think what I would ask each of the members here is to consider both this request, and then we've got a couple slides on potential future Tier 3 projects. And if we can get, and I don't know whether the slides will get into detail around how long you think you might want to borrow for these other ones. And if it's possible at all to get a sense of, if we went and borrowed for all of these items, given today's interest rates, what's the cumulative impact, right, on our debt payments and the property tax bill? Because without that information, project by project, it's kind of hard to provide input, at least for me anyway, without knowing the impact. Is that even possible to do? Just at a high level, just
High
ranges,
level,
yeah.
X dollars per million.
Exactly,
something like
right? You're looking puzzled, Carrie.
No, I'm just trying to think this through, because this process and the way that we're approaching it is different than what we've done. So I'm just trying
Yes.
to.
And I think you're hearing some positive, I think you're hearing that we're open to it, but I think it's difficult to put it in context of other needs that we're just going to talk about in 2 minutes.
And I would just have one more ask, and that is, if it's a 10-year term for the bonds, that we envision that the amount of money borrowed could cover the costs of 10 years of work, so that those last 5 years aren't saddled with paying our current expenses plus we're still paying for the last 5 years. To me, that doesn't sit right. Can we do this in a very clear, upfront way to say, rather than expense this, the work we do on the roads has a useful life that lasts 10 years, we're going to pre-fund through a borrowing 10 years worth of work for the highway.
Yeah. So if I could just throw out there, the useful life on the roads is 20 years. And we have a long-standing practice of debt service for roads, 10-year term.
Okay.
I just want to make
Great.
sure there's a
Great.
common understanding there.
Great. As long as we aren't borrowing for street sweeping and snow plowing, right?
We're not doing that.
Good.
Okay, let me just, Peggy, you had another question or comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, historical practice from town meeting was voting in about 4 million every year, so that must have been a bond, otherwise town meeting wouldn't have to vote on it. Always an incredible amount of interest in what roads they are. And I will just throw out there that I think road maintenance can be very important going forward with self-driving or partial self-driving cars, which many of us already have, in terms of pavement quality, center lines, sidelines, et cetera. So road maintenance is not just maintenance in the future. It's going to be more than that. It's going to be part of driving.
All right, let's go to other potential Tier 3 projects that might be coming up. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we wanted to be sure.
We didn't go over the Public Works facility, did we? Did we go over those? Yeah.
For public safety. We
Or
didn't
public
talk about
safety, yeah.
So those are the building projects that we have, that we don't have any additional information. We are going to be kicking off a feasibility study process for public works and public safety to get better information on options, timetables, et cetera.
Okay, so I guess just before we go to the schools, I see at least here there's 4, right? Public Works Facility, Public Safety, Walden Street Complex, and Public Safety Complex. is that 3 or 4? Yeah.
It was 4.
The 4, okay. Plus the 5th, road maintenance, I think.
No,
is-
public works
this
infrastructure
is-
was the 4th.
Oh, 4th.
And do you have a timeline?
It says
Pavement management.
What?
Yeah, it shouldn't say public safety complex. I think that's just the
Oh,
roads.
okay. It's just the roads, okay. So there's 4, we just talked about 1, and then there's
Yeah.
3 others.
Yeah.
So I think what you heard was for those 4, some sense, and even if it's high-level rough numbers, right? Here's what we can anticipate potentially borrowing this many years, et cetera, and what the impact is of each. Then we can provide, I think, that input in context. Okay? Great, thank you.
What's your timeline for having that information? Do you know right now?
A year.
A year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lori?
Yeah, so thank you. We wanted to be sure we didn't leave here tonight without talking about the Regional School Committee's recent discussion of the campus and some remaining needs there at the high school. So the primary one to discuss would be a warrant that's going to come forward from the Regional Committee for an amenities restroom facility, essentially, down at Memorial Field. That's never actually been executed in the 8 years since all the renovations to the campus. We are running off of portable toilets, not in compliance with the building code or the plumbing code. And it's not accessible to those who need it. Time is just up. So the regional committees approved a warrant for what we're proposing at $2.4 million. We had a feasibility and schematic design done of this in 2018. The cost has doubled since then. Okay. It's about a 1,600 square foot building with just basic restroom facilities to code for the capacity of the stadium. We'll be able to go to the plumbing board and ask for a variance waiver to drop the number in half because it's a school site. So we'll be looking for 22 toilets rather than 44. And then there's a very small concession area, probably of like 300 square feet, but we're also limited by impervious surface and other things that oversee the campus. So it would be a very basic building, but would finally meet the needs that we have down there. And it's not just, people think it's football games, it's that site is used all day, constantly, and especially on weekends and nights by the youth groups and all. It will be assessed based on the regional agreement, so the Concord portion would be appropriate to the October 1 enrollments. We're running at what, 76% Concord. Carlisle would be funding the other 24.
Now, will this have to go in front of Carlisle's
Yes,
committee as
absolutely.
well, right? Or their annual meeting?
Yes.
Okay, and how comfortable are you in terms of an update to the estimate that you have?
So we actually reached back out to the group that had done the original one and asked them to update it, which they did over the last 2 months. So
And
we're
you'll
as
have a-
comfortable as we can be in the very volatile construction environment. I
Okay,
think.
so with your presentation, you'd have somewhat of a schematic and
Yes.
show it in terms of where it is in the
Yes.
field and all?
Yeah, we have most of that now. We just have to pull it all together.
And with the accessibility, is that so wheelchair accessible?
Very much so. And there'll be a family, gender-neutral opportunity there too, so that it meets everybody's needs and hopefully is the plan for the long term.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot more detail on restrooms if you're interested, but I probably would spare you that.
And I assume there's no way we can get it smaller, that's sort of, we're at the minimum
Oh,
that it can
Plumbing
be.
code is the plumbing code.
What is your chance of getting it cut in half?
The,
'Cause it was
I've actually been to
originally
the plumbing
44.
board recently because of the middle school project, which I've learned a lot. I think the reduction of 50% is likely. I haven't seen them turn others down. I've been on while other schools
Okay.
go up for that, so that doesn't seem to be a highly debated request.
There was some discussion about whether we could do a phased approach, whether we could do the design first this year and then build the restrooms next year. There's also been discussion about how we need the restrooms now, not next year. Do you have an idea of how much just the design component
I do it buried in my email. I can break it out and get it to you. I don't
Okay, I
wanna
thought it was like,
sort.
I think, if I remember from the school committee, it was about $270,000.
Yeah, that sounds about
Out of this
right.
2.4 million project.
0.34.
And we can't go to the plumbing board till the design is done, so if you split it up, you're gonna lose a lot of time, and this will go on for another 2 or 3 years, so. So that's one. The other thing we'll just put on your radar, that there's a lot.
Hey, Lori, is
Oh,
that,
yeah.
that's excluded debt, right?
Yeah,
And so we'd have to have a vote, an election also?
Correct.
Okay.
both communities.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, there's something else on that. I found out, there was a question that came up about how much it costs to have a special town election and a special town meeting to ratify it. $20,000 to $21,000 for each one.
Okay, good to know.
We can borrow that.
But there's a lot of ballots coming up with the different elections. There might be a way to piggyback. We didn't get that far and haven't talked to Kari yet.
You had a question, Chris? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, are you planning on coming to the spring meeting, the regular annual town meeting? Okay, thank you.
And then just on your radar, which we're actually going to fundraise with some of the local groups as much as possible, and probably consider CPC as a track on the entryway there by the Walden Street entrance where the landfill was remediated, and it's been this big wide open field for years. So that's a private-public potential partnership, but that's not coming anywhere here immediately. We're going to really work with the community groups that have expressed interest and see how much can happen that way.
What kind of a timeline do you have for that, for raising the funds?
The
As long as it takes? But,
Yeah, well,
you know.
the school committee's talked about seeing where we are a year from now and deciding how much progress we've made and then making
Okay.
decisions from there. I think CPC is an option too, so we probably want to be sure we're applying in September for that
And
cycle.
I know that you made a comment that you probably couldn't have lighting there, which, I don't think is a big issue with a track field. But would you have to do any further analysis for the field itself in terms of
So as
the
part
permeability?
Of this, part of the schematic design work we did 5 years ago, that was all looked at and what the options are. The cap on the landfill means we can't permeate it, so
Right.
it does have considerable restrictions. We didn't get as far as talking about lighting there. We had when there were other options on the table, but that's not the case anymore. So.
Okay, thank you.
Don, go ahead.
And is there any possibility to site it so that you could share the restrooms with the field? Because track and field events, you have hundreds of people.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be on far side of the campus from each other probably, but they're runners, right? So
That's right.
send them over there.
But the parents
To your
been happy.
point, Don.
They're very close.
Yeah.
So what's the estimated,
Just for what it's worth, the Hunt Gym is the restroom facility.
The spot.
For the current.
When they're running.
So let's not
Yeah.
forget that's a
Yeah.
need for the families.
Yeah, absolutely.
what's the estimated cost for the track?
We're ballparking that based on the updated estimate from the same design firm at $2 million.
And the goal would be to fund X percent public,
100%.
private?
Yeah, 100.
100%
We didn't get that
private?
far yet. I
100%.
think we're in the early
Okay.
stages of that
Yeah,
discussion.
Okay. Other questions, folks on the Zoom call?
Do you have any questions that we should have asked you?
I don't think so. I think we hit the highlights of that topic.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. So I like the fact that everything's on one page. So I think everybody's got, when we post it, everybody will see exactly how much the town is looking to spend for the next 5 years. I think the one piece, and I don't remember whether, no, actually you do, because you're assuming 900 a year, but when will you have the full plan done where you might say late spring? Okay, that's good. So I think when we get to that point, hopefully next year, we will truly have a plan that goes out and in one document. So thank you for that. That was very good. Appreciate that. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will provide input on this question, and then, to the extent that the committee members have other input to provide to the entire plan, in writing before next week would be helpful, so we can discuss it. If not, bring the questions and the input.
So we could send it to
We
you?
can consolidate, send it to me, and then we can consolidate it and actually have written input back to folks.
Okay.
Okay? Cool. Thank you. Oh, question. Come on, name, rank, and serial number.
Taking public comment on.
Sure, why not? We're open to that.
Thanks, Lori. Don't go too far.
Hi, I'm Terry Ackerman, 89 Heathbridge Road. I'm on the select board, but I'm just speaking for myself. I have 3 comments. First of all, you were talking about stormwater utility. I'm the liaison for that Public Works Commission, and I know they're planning on December 5th from 7 to 9 p.m. That'll be the first forum, the first of several forums where they're going to start discussing how they're going to set up this utility with whether it's an enterprise fund or however it's all going to work. December 5th from 7 to 9. Also, I've been working with Carrie and really pushing for an update of user fees and chargebacks on enterprise funds. And I had a couple of examples that came up tonight. The $100,000 for the Doug White Field. That's an example of if the user fees include depreciation and capital and, everything, then, those kinds of things can come out of the general fund capital plan, which I personally think we should do. And really thinking out of the box, another one would be something like the COA van. If it could be used for other citizens, for, after 2:30 when the Council on Aging closes or weekends or whatever, and each rider pays $5 or whatever, and all these monies go into some kind of a revolving fund or whatever to help defer and pay for that van. So to really be thinking out of the box for these alternate revenues, because we just don't have enough money in the general
So
fund.
in a lot of countries, you have to pay to use toilets. Should we consider that for the?
Maybe. Thank you.
And
Sorry?
somebody really.
$5.
I'm just saying.
$5 would be good, yeah.
Any other public comment? That was a joke, to be very clear. Okay. Approval of the
Dean
minute.
Banfield.
Prashant, Dean had his hand up.
I'm sorry?
Dean.
Who?
Oh, Dean,
Banfield.
Dean. Long time no see.
Oh, thanks for recognizing me. Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace. I'm on the Solar Implementation Task Force, but I'm just speaking for myself tonight. Terry touched on something that I am kind of questioning, and that is that the town is considering a significant amount of funding for replacing the turf up at the Doug White Fields. Those fields are part of a very complex intermunicipal agreement between the district and the town, but also with sort of a third party involved, and that is Friends of CC Fields. And my understanding was that the soccer youth group, Concord Carlisle Youth Soccer, has an assessment that's part of their user fees, which goes into a sinking fund to replace those turf fields when the time comes. So I'm to hear tonight that they are, part of a capital plan that the town is undertaking and is not being laid off on that sinking fund, sort of surprised me. Could someone just comment on that? I may have this all wrong, but my understanding is that that's how that whole thing was set up. So thank you.
So the turf project was part of the ARPA funding, and the ARPA funding can't happen without a vote of the select board. So the reason why I didn't include it, because there was a lot of questions, just what he brought up as well as others. So it's on the radar, but it's not a capital project that can just move forward.
I guess I'm confused. I think Dean is suggesting that an item, Dean, am I correct to say you're suggesting that an item that's in the plan should actually be funded by this sinking fund that's financed by? Or at least partially?
So the youth soccer, it needs to be verified. But my understanding was when those fields were built, that from that point forward, Concord Carlisle Youth Soccer would include as part of the assessment of any of the youth group fees that they charge for participation in their programs, they would charge a small assessment that would be put aside for the replacement of the turf. And so to have this coming around as a town responsibility is unusual to me. In fact, the town, as I understand it, maintains those fields, and the funds that pay for the maintenance flow somehow from that fund of Concord Carlisle Youth Soccer or the Friends of CC Soccer. That was my understanding. I really think it needs to be verified because the town shouldn't really have to put this on its books anywhere. It should just be part of the arrangement that's been made with that organization.
Yeah, remember, the funding for that project would probably be in excess of $1 million, and the reason why it was even put on the plan is just for this purpose, to start the discussion and to really uncover some of those unknowns that I know about, that there was user fees. So there's a lot more to do, but we need to start talking about that because the field's it's a potential liability.
So where is, thank you, Dean, so the 100,000 is for field replacement? It's only a down payment?
It's for a consultant.
It's for a consultant.
Yeah, design and kind of feasibility to see what that would cost. So it starts.
But I guess to Dean's point, shouldn't that of itself just be paid out of these funds that they have?
Yeah,
Yeah,
again.
but he didn't put it in the.
I earmarked ARPA. And
Oh, I see, you marked it.
He moved
Got
it over,
Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
that's a conversation that we
Later.
need to have
Okay.
further discussions with.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the public? Input? All right, D.
Yes, we have minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes, and I'd like to take them one at a time. I know Chris has some. Does anybody have comments for the September 21 minutes?
I do.
Yes, Chris?
Okay, so these are not substantial comments, but I think they clarify. So.
Right.
Under the first page there, on item 3, update on follow-up items.
Yes.
In the last sentence.
Yes.
It just says Hilltop presentation slides and metrics showing inflation of services. I don't know what inflation of services is, but I think you should tell the public, Hilltop is the town's financial advisor. Right, so it'd be comma, the town's financial advisor, comma, slides and metrics will also be posted. I think inflation of services is a confusing term. I have no idea what that means. I don't recall that. So I'll give this to you, Dee, so you'll have my version, but that was one suggested recommendation on that one. That was it on September 21.
Okay. Does anybody, with that correction?
I do.
Oh, on that particular one, Peggy?
Yes, September 21st.
Yes.
I think the respectfully submitted should be your name, not Lori.
Lori, no, on the September 21, that's Lori wrote those. I edited them.
I think they should always come from the clerk.
Yeah, you oversee it. I think it should say the clerk. You submit them technically to us.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You own it.
You're right, Peggy.
Yeah, okay. Woo! Thank you.
Okay.
Don't laugh, you're next.
Good to go, girl.
Okay, and that was the only one on that? So I will further investigate. I get the Hilltop Financial Services Organization and try to get other clarification on the inflation of services.
I would just strike it. I think
just
I think
strike
you're
it?
fine to just say Hilltop, the town's financial advisor. Their presentation slides and metrics will also be posted. That's it. You don't have to say what it was.
Okay, financial advisor.
I'll give it to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So with that amendment, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved?
I'll make a motion.
Wait, Dee?
Yes?
We're going to have to do roll call, so I recommend we get all the minutes together and approve them in one roll call.
Okay, all right, good.
That may or may not work, okay? All right.
Okay.
So,
Go to the
so we'll put
19th.
that aside for now, and we'll go on to the next one.
Okay.
Now, these were the minutes from October 19th, which YouTube did not come through. So what we have here are my notes as well as John's comments. And so I'd like to know if you would like, and I have this on, that this is a draft. I'd like to know if anybody would have additional comments for this.
I do.
Okay, and if you want to give them to me now,
Yep.
or we could, if you want to give them to me
Mine
now,
are
that's
simple.
fine.
I could give them to you now. So
Yep.
item
And then-
3, update on follow-up items. So this
Yes.
is the October 19th.
Yes.
The first sentence does not have a period, so spent to date of the total budget, period. Then Miss Briggs, right? 2 separate thoughts there.
Okay.
Second line, spent to date of
Spent to
the,
date
of the total budget, period, right? And then we're talking about something else, right?
And then Ms. Briggs stated.
Right, got
Okay,
it.
all right.
Item 5, Liz Rust, so it's Ms. Rust, not Rusk, R-U-S-T.
R-U-S-S.
R-U-S-T,
Rust.
He is in
Rust.
Oh, she is, that is right, Miss Rust.
Yeah, and it's twice in that paragraph D.
Miss Rust, okay, got it.
Okay, so there's that. And under item 7, the headline, guidelines in the context of a single warrant article for CPS, CCRHS. It's
Where are
not,
we, what line?
item 7, the headline.
Title.
Oh, the headline, okay.
Right, so it's it's
Our-
Concord Carlisle Regional High School, not SH, it's HS.
Or it's technically
Or
CCRSD.
CCRHS.
RSD.
RSD, yeah, technically, whoever you want to do it, but it's
RSD, yeah.
not, it's not SH.
Regional District.
That's it for me.
That's it for there. Any other comments on this?
Question on that. Eric, did you have some comments that you wanted to add to this one? I thought I remember.
Oh, it was Eric, not John.
You
I'm
said
sorry,
John.
John. I'm sorry. It
Give
was
all
Eric.
credit to
Eric and I, yes, Eric and I talked about this, and he didn't have any more, right?
Yeah, I did. This is Eric. I did take a look. I didn't have anything else to add. I had taken notes, just kind of shorthand notes during the meeting itself, and they didn't add much to what Dee captured.
So on this item, I wasn't offering an option, technically. When we talked about the single warrant article,
Yeah.
I wasn't offering an option for combining. I was raising the point that this concept has been discussed. So can we say, open the discussion by raising a concept that has been discussed? I can
Where
give
are
you.
you on
I'm on
this?
item 7.
Item 7.
I'll send you the sentence, but open the discussion by raising a concept
Oh, all right. By raising a concept.
that has been discussed to combine, and then you can leave the rest of it the same.
To combine, okay?
3 operating, right? And then you can leave the rest of it the same. Thank you.
All right. By offering, or combining, to combine, both 3 operating,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
Now, with this, with the corrections to this?
Let's go to the next one.
Well, I'm just asking about amending anything on this one. Is this fine as
me.
amended?
Yes.
Okay.
Dee, the video is online now, if you want to go back and
No,
look,
that's
'cause
fine.
you said
I
it
think
wasn't
we're
online.
good with this. Thank you.
Just giving you an update.
Greg, do it, Greg. Why don't you go back, watch it, and come back to us?
Hold on. Greg does make.
I wasn't at the meeting, so I should.
Oh,
Greg, you can be clerk next year.
yeah.
No, we
thank you.
already have that over here. Don is right here.
Dee, there is one correction that I'd like to make on the October 19th. Since
Okay.
Greg pointed out that the video is now online, we should include the link to the video on the minutes like we do with the others.
All righty.
Thank you.
Link, conclude.
Thank you, that's what I was trying to say.
Is that, oh, thank you, Craig. Okay. Because it wasn't available. Okay, goody. All right. That's on this side. All right, so as amended, now we get to the third set. This is the October 26th meeting.
Okay.
Comment. There's Chris, okay.
I do. This one is just, I think it reads better. It's more easy to understand. Under item 5,
Under
1,
item-
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines down, there's a sentence that starts, investment income also is rising
Yeah.
due to bond receipts.
Yeah.
I think it would be better said, investment income also is rising due to income earned on bond receipts.
Oh, good, okay.
For the middle school building project, period.
Income earned, don't go too fast for me,
Sorry.
please. On
On bond
income earned
receipts.
On bond receipts,
For the middle school building project, period. You can strike,
school building project, period.
period. That's it.
Okay.
That's it for
And
me.
interest, okay,
Okay?
all right.
That's it for me.
And that's it for you?
Yep.
Anybody else have
Oh, no, I'm
comment?
sorry, I'm sorry, it's not. I have one, I'm sorry, I apologize.
All right,
There was a
what
third
page are we on now?
I'm on the last page.
Oh, of course you're on the last page, yes.
So for some reason, in that paragraph, the first paragraph, it says next, the 5-year projections were shown.
Yeah.
And middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, addition this year is big. in
Oh, yeah,
quote-
it really, no, she really emphasized big. Do you
Yeah,
want, all right,
No,
okay.
in lowercase, right? If you want to say
All
big,
right.
but it should be lowercase, right?
Okay. Can I put it in quotes still?
Sure.
All right.
Sure, that's
okay.
fine.
I just wanted to emphasize
Yeah,
it.
well, you can underline it, but you can't make it like that. Okay. So,
It's not a movie.
yeah, right. That's right. And the last paragraph, this sentence, I don't know if this is correct, and I don't know, Anthony, if you'll know. It says, Ms. LaFleur indicated that FY '23 is getting close to closing with $800,000 being returned to free cash and $3 million in receipts. What is the $3 million for? I know those numbers are right, but the $3 million.
It was excess local receipts.
Excess local receipts.
Close to closing
Yeah.
with 800
That's
being
what it is,
returned to
over
free-
budget.
and
That's
3
what I
million
wanted.
for in excess? Okay.
There you go. Then that'll make sense, I think.
Okay, excess local.
Okay, that's it for me. Sorry, Dee, that's it.
So, not a
That's all
question.
right, Chris. We still have to talk about the first one.
Sorry, I
though.
have one comment for you.
Oh, no.
Yes. So you have on the October 26th, by the way, I was not there, I'm only reading the minutes, I've not watched the video. You have 2 minutes, one is for the Finance Committee and one is for the Guidelines Subcommittee.
Yeah,
On the
right.
Finance Committee, say, Lindsay joined at 9:22,
Yes,
but by that point in time, it was already the Guidelines meeting.
yes, that's correct. She did not get there until 9:22.
So she was not there at the Finance Committee meeting, period.
The finance,
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
do I have it correct?
I think you do.
No.
I have it correct. Why? What are you saying to me?
There's 2 sets of minutes here. One is
That
for the
is
Finance
correct.
Committee and one is for the Guidelines Subcommittee.
Yes.
She and I neither of us were at the Finance Committee meeting.
So can I
That's
make,
correct.
no, hold on. Can I make a suggestion? At the top of page 4, where it says item 1,
Yeah.
to order, over there, you should indicate that both Lindsay and Amrith arrived for the subcommittee, for the guidelines committee.
Did you
subcommittee.
arrive for it,
I
Amber?
was there late for the Guidelines meeting. Yes.
Exactly. So they both were not there, so you should strike them on page 1 of this.
That's what he's trying to tell you.
I don't know when I joined, but I joined late for that one.
Right.
I can go back and look and whether I
Oh,
joined.
would you
the
please, and
Finance
let me
Committee.
know when you think you
Yeah,
arrived?
I'll do that.
So here's my recommendations, where it says members present, members absent on the finance committee one.
Yes.
Add Lindsay to being absent on the finance committee. Copy those entire 2 paragraphs of the subcommittee, and then move Amrith and Lindsay to being present for subcommittee. That's what he's trying to tell you. That's all. We can discuss it offline.
Let me know the time.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Greg, is that video up?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Let's watch the video. I think we should go right to the video.
Make sure you get it in seconds.
Yeah, Greg, when you're
You
done
could probably
watching that-
Google that
It's
and Google would
military
tell me
time.
when you joined, so.
Okay. Just a question for Lindsay. Lindsay, did you and Lois get the spreadsheets from Anthony and Rob that we had requested at that meeting so that you can be ready for the meeting on Thursday?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, because they're going to need it for Thursday to combine everything.
See what you have to look
We
for?
got to vote the minutes too, right?
Okay, how do we want to vote the minutes, Ms. Clerk?
We would like to vote for all the minutes as amended, and it would show that each one was amended and all that. So is there?
I move that we approve the minutes from September 21st, 2023 for the Finance Committee, October 19th, 2023 for the Finance Committee, October 26th for the Finance Committee, and also the Guidelines Subcommittee as amended.
Second.
All in
favor?
You have to
We
go
have to
around.
do the
Oh,
roll call.
Oh, wait a minute, let me get my roll call sheet. Honestly.
We're working you tonight.
That's why we're
Dave.
doing it.
Okay, all
That's why we're
right,
doing it.
Suresh.
Yes.
All right, Peggy.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Eric. Did he leave?
Yes.
Oh, John.
Yes.
Greg.
Abstain.
Abstain. Oh, wait a minute.
He has to go back and watch, he has to go back and watch the video.
Abstain. Yes, go back. They're all on YouTube now. Amrith. Amrith.
You're
You're
muted.
you're
You're on
mute.
mute. You're on mute.
You're muted.
He's talking to somebody else.
Oh,
Keep
oh.
going.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay, thumbs up. Don.
Yes.
Next online here. Lindsay.
Yes.
Dee. Yes. Parashar.
Yes.
Parashar. Okay. Carlin.
Aye.
Christine.
Yes.
Quasi.
Yes.
Thank you. And Lois is not here. So that's it.
Okay, thank you
All right.
very much. Review
Yeah, I have an
follow-up.
answer for you on October 26th. It's not going to be possible looking at the video to tell when I joined. I just
Okay.
skimmed through it quickly.
So do you have a time?
No, no,
Give me a time, Amrith.
We don't need a time.
8:32.
It's after 9:02, I know.
9:03.
Approximately 9:02.
Sometime after 9:02, I think will work.
All right.
He was spotted on security footage.
It's at your house.
All right, let's review follow-up items.
Well,
So,
Lois was very precise in what time Lindsay arrived, which was 9:22. She made a point of letting me know that, so I was very happy about that.
okay, so I have been slacking off on doing the follow-up items. I will have them done by Thursday, but at today's meeting, I have input to me on the capital plan that we just heard before Monday, the 27th. So if anybody has input, questions they want to ask further, changes they'd like to see, whatever, send them in. We will then discuss them on the 27th. Okay? Anybody else have any other input that they thought coming out of this meeting? That was the big one that I noted.
Well, obviously feedback to Kerry on this proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough, okay, yep, and Kerry has to send back, and actually, Anthony, you're gonna develop the borrowing for the 4 and what the impact is, right? Okay.
Did you also want to have a follow-up on?
There's no mic for you.
Did you also want to have a follow-up on the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 policies for future reference?
What do you mean?
In other words, you were asking at the beginning of the meeting about the procedures around identifying items individually or in aggregate, and
For the schools,
Anthony's-
right? I would-
No.
Yeah, he said it'll be a while, I think.
Oh, in term,
am I speaking French?
no. So I think the question got answered, That's why so what happened was Tier 1 before was 0 to
Right,
100.
but
Now they've
also
changed those.
okay. I thought I heard that there was there was a discussion about reviewing the procedures for future years.
Anthony's going to do that, I think, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mentioned
yes.
doing that after kind of around after town meeting.
After town meeting,
all the
in the
policies.
future.
Right. all
After
the
after the
procedures
town
and
meeting.
Yeah, so not
Okay.
not now,
All right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's not our to-do. Right.
No, but I am going to put it down as a follow-up item because it is actually on one of the milestones that we have for ourselves. So, thank you.
Is there any other public comment? No? And
I have a question. This is for
Well,
Marcia.
we have to be a little bit careful because the agenda, but keep going.
Question.
Yeah.
How would you evaluate this capital plan process that we did today?
I don't know. How would you evaluate it? I'll turn the question around while I write
was
something down.
not completely satisfied with all the information that we received,
Okay.
and I think that we could have had more information about the 5-year capital plans from all parties, but it was more information than I was actually expecting to get.
So what I would advise is put that in writing because what I'd like to do is based on the input that we all have, a formal letter that basically provides our opinion. So, yeah. I think it's a good first start, frankly.
I
It's
thought it
all
was
on
good.
one page.
I
Yeah,
thought it
it's
was
one
good.
document.
It made sense, yeah, I understood it.
Yeah.
It was good.
The detail and the ending where you allocated the buckets as to, which projects you were going to fund and how. I thought that was extremely helpful.
I just have one question. Maybe, Anthony, can you tell us when you will have your numbers finished?
For the capital plan?
Yeah.
Kerry still has to review it. We'd have to incorporate some of the late asks and, a couple of weeks.
Are you going to have all of your information to us prior to when we have to have our number, our percent increase number? We're not going to have a preliminary guideline. We're going to have a final guideline.
Right, so
And-
I talked to Kerry about that, and Kerry's going to lead the discussion on Thursday, where it's still something new to me, so, yeah, we're going
Okay.
to lean a little bit on Kerry for Thursday night.
Okay, but you would have all of your information available at that time?
Yes.
The schools apparently will not have all their information available, so I'm a little perplexed in terms of how we're
When
going
you
to
say
handle that.
information, are you talking about the operating and capital or just capital?
I'm talking about their operating and capital.
I see.
And so I just wanted,
The detail on it.
well, I'm just asking if we would have it for the towns. So we will have all the information that we need in order to, you don't think so?
I don't think so
No, I
either,
think,
yeah.
I think we're in the same place we always are, Dee. So they're still working through the operating budget, both the schools and the town.
Right.
We're going to cut a final guideline before they're done, and we
Well,
always do. So we'll have the information we wanted that we didn't have at the last meeting, that we will have. We'll have a model. Remember, we.
Yeah, I know about the model, yeah.
We'll
yeah.
have all that, and we'll have
Okay.
maybe whatever updated info they have.
Okay. So I think that the town's numbers are going to be much closer than I think what's going on with the schools. And
Could be.
so if we set a guideline without, with incomplete information,
Yep.
do we have the opportunity, and this probably isn't for you, this is for our committee to understand, would we have an opportunity to adjust our guideline
Up
after?
till town meeting. Well, you don't necessarily change
Well,
the guideline, but
yeah.
you can change your requested
Recommendation,
amount or
right.
approved amount. Recommendation,
we
right.
can. Okay, okay.
This is what happened
That's why I
last
was
year.
kind of curious in terms of if we'd have really solid numbers from you by the time we have to do that, which is like November 26th, or by the 28th, you'd get a letter.
Yeah,
with
that's
our
okay.
guidelines.
Yeah, like Christine mentioned, the forms for the operating budget's outdated department heads, so I think the scheduled, Kerry and I were talking over the past couple of days, I think the schedule was to present a budget to the select board on December 4th. We're not going to make that date, so we're talking about being for December 18th with departments'
Okay.
budgets.
Like with real
Real-
solid.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just review the calendar before we depart and somebody calls to adjourn here. So Thursday, we have a regular meeting. At that regular meeting, we're gonna get updated numbers from the town and the schools, whatever state they're in, 5-year numbers. Operating. We were supposed to have also provided input to town and school for capital plan, but I think we can defer that to the next meeting, which is Monday, November 27th. Okay, so just want to,
Well, that was I thought that was if you needed it for.
we need it.
It sounds like
We need it though, because otherwise we're not going to have an opportunity to actually, but it was always, no,
Yeah, it was there.
it was always there.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
not if we
Sure,
need-
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
in September, we turned it into a required meeting.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is if Lori can send out a invite on Outlook to everybody, because it's not on people's calendars,
No,
November
it was
27th.
a kind of a save the date that we have, but that's fine, but we can't have it here because there is a select board meeting that night. so
Wherever, we
find
can,
another
we can
location.
find another location over there, wherever, it doesn't really matter. But let's get the date out to everybody.
Use that room.
Yeah.
There's a problem with having a meeting going on in the select board room and at the hearing room at the same
Well,
time.
they'll figure it out.
From the Minuteman
They'll,
meeting network, that's-
let them figure it out.
Or if it's easier, we could do it all Zoom. if
John,
that's
is your
easier.
restaurant available? I'm joking.
Provide discounts.
If we did it all Zoom, would that be all right?
Somebody has to be there in person to chair.
We could have a room. I think-
Process, but we'll figure
Lori's
it out. I'm sure they'll
identified a
figure it
room,
out.
Maybe a Kai's Road.
We'll figure that out. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not, are we not do the logistics here? I trust Anthony and company to figure that out. 1 second, Kathy. December 14th is the next meeting after that. Again, just want to make sure, if it's not on people's calendars, Lori should send that
That's a
out.
Thursday? or
That is a Thursday, okay? Now,
Is that our regular
it is a
December
regular meeting, and we are supposed to vote, well, I don't think, so it's basically, it says Finance Committee regular meeting and guideline meeting?
meeting? We're done.
We will have
We'll be
budgets
done
by
by
then,
then.
hopefully?
No,
hoping-
you'll have issued guideline at the end of
Guideline
November.
will have been done,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then
the
they will give
guideline-
us an update, just like they do,
Okay.
as to, oh, by the
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
this is where we are, and we can opine or whatever we want to do.
Shake our heads.
Shake our heads or
What
whatever.
day was that? Was that
14th.
December who?
December 14th.
Yeah.
Monday.
So December 14th is on our calendars, as in Lorraine
Okay,
has
that's
sent
good.
this out.
Yeah,
That's
it
good.
is,
Okay, but I
7
just want to
o'clock.
remind everybody, upcoming meetings.
Yeah.
To give
Okay?
you an idea of what the school's plans are as far as
I,
their
right, no, right now, I don't,
okay.
I just keep going here. I'm sorry. Kathy, did you have a question?
December 14th.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay. We're done, I think?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Anthony
correspondence.
because he's new,
No
and
correspondence,
how's it going?
I'll ask him to confirm.
It's going great. It's been a ton of work, and just putting together the capital plan with Kerry gone was a lot for me to really learn about the town in a short period of time. So, that work was, it was a lot of hours put into kind of really meeting with department heads to truly understand the needs of them and what we have funds available to do this. And so it's going great. It's a difficult time to be thrown into the process, to start new and not know and not being able to go back and review some old stuff. But Kerry and I, we feel comfortable where we are right now, and we're working on getting that tax rate set, and we have some DOR required forms to go. So we're feeling comfortable, but we're doing a lot of work.
Okay. And you know that we've got more expenses coming up in the future, that the deferred maintenance and things like that, I'm sure they've told you all about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, one of the things that, if you take a look at the slides again, one of the facilities was really something where there was a lot of ask. And Kerry mentioned how many buildings that we have. And even there's, I guess there's a couple of farmhouses that the town owns that are getting to the point where
Right.
there's a lot, still more needs that there's just not funds right now to really address. So, getting caught up on all of that, but we really, and I think reviewing the financial policies that we have would be beneficial, and Kerry and I talked about that too. And what that process looks like, I don't know, you know, if it's just us or if it's a combination of maybe a member of FinCom and a member of Select Board, and come up with some good financial policies with how to handle free cash, how to handle capital, how to handle, you know, some stabilizations funds, the plan for those future costs.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe we'll move it on.
Yeah.
What?
Can I get a motion to adjourn? You guys can just take it off.
Yeah,
right?
you
Oh,
have that conversation.
well, I thought Anthony should have an opportunity to just kind of say he liked it or didn't like it, right? He's
all
here
great.
and he's going to stay. Okay.
Well, we don't know if he's staying.
Motion
but
to
he's here.
adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, everybody. See you in 2 days.
9:10 PM.